Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Playwright Conversations with leading sports persons and daring people from across the world. Today we have a very famous lady from New Zealand, Lydia Bradey, and she is the first woman to conquer Mount Everest without oxygen. Fantastic. And welcome, Lydia, and we're very proud of your feats.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be speaking to you, and thank you for the invitation.
It's really nice to know that we were connected through Mr. Glenn Turner, who we had on our show before. And it's great to be talking to someone who is 6.5 hours ahead of us right now.
Yeah. The same sunshine. We see the same sunshine.
We see the same sunshine, yeah. Lydia, I'm going to ask you to talk about your early childhood first and tell me how did you get into this sport? And I also believe that you were not much of a sports person in your early years, but you became such a famous climber now. So tell me about the early years.
My early years, when I was a young child, we were not very well off. And I was really bad at sports, and I couldn't do a handstand, which for a girl was quite a big deal. And I also used to get teased with the way that I walked. You know, I walked a little bit funny and people would tease me. And for me, sports days were this big black cloud coming at me 3 months out, 2 months out, 2 weeks out. It was quite a big thing. And then when I was 14, my mother sent me on a sort of a course that the Education Department of New Zealand used to run in the outdoors. And I don't know where she got that idea from, but it was inspired. And then I discovered what we call tramping. Now we call it hiking, and a little bit of abseiling and camping out, and I was hooked.
That's fantastic to know. And you're probably, I mean, there are, these are quirks of fate. Your mother sent you to the camp. Maybe she hadn't, and maybe she'd sent you to a writing class instead or some creative thing. Otherwise, you would have had another career altogether.
Well,
yeah.
Pardon. So funny you should say that, but I was always really into writing, and I used to love poetry and writing stories, and I would always, and when I was 13, I co-won an under 19 year age poetry competition. So I was always a bookworm. So she didn't need to send me to a writing course. She needed me to do some walking around and discover some confidence.
Yeah, I can see that. And the writing part resonates with me, as I'm also an author, and you've also authored a book on your first climb up there without oxygen to Everest. So, but I'm going to now ask you to speak a little bit about your overall career and how does it feel to be such an iconic person for aspiring mountaineers and people who aspire to climb. And then you're also a mountain guide. So what has the journey been like, Lydia? Talk about the journey.
The journey for me has been very unpredictable. And when you say that I'm quite famous and things, yes, I climbed Mount Everest without oxygen way back in 1988. But it really is only in the last decade, if you like, that I have, no, a decade, 15 years, that I have had a lot of international recognition. And within that time, again, it seems that super recently in New Zealand and around the world, I'm almost even more well known. So as I have become older, I've become more famous, which is quite fun, really. So I began, as I said, of course, I wasn't into the outdoors at all. I was into writing poetry. And then I went on this mountain craft course. And then I, as a 14-year-old, I joined a club. And I joined lots of clubs, and older people took me under their wing. And I learned some crucial lessons because they were very good climbers and hikers, like serious hikers and explorers. And of course, I was a beginner. So why would they want me with them? Well, I discovered that it doesn't matter how good you are if you try really hard and you do some hard work. So what I could do is I could go and get water from the stream, or I could dig in the snow, or I could help do the chores, at a camp. And I could always be positive. And those two things, being positive and doing some hard work, there's the doors open for you.
I totally agree.
And
in fact,
so,
go ahead.
So I did a lot of mountaineering in New Zealand, and then I went overseas for 5 years when I was 19. And I had wanted to go to university, but I couldn't decide which of the billion things that I was interested in. And so I decided to go climbing. And then I went from Alaska, where I, as we would say, got spanked. I thought that I was quite a good alpinist, and I found out that I wasn't actually that amazing. So some big lessons, lots of big lessons, and cried a lot. I go, I'm not so good as I thought I was. And then I went to Yosemite Valley in California, and I climbed some of those big cliffs, multi-day, 7, 8, sometimes 9-day climbs. And they climbed it uniquely. They climb it with pieces of equipment, not holding on with their fingers and toes. So you didn't have to be strong, you had to be mentally strong, and you had to be clever. And I picked that up, and I went up for the exploration of the journey. And then after that, I kept traveling, and I connected with quite a few British people and went on some British expeditions, including the last expedition to be on the highest mountain in Bhutan, Gangkar Punsum. And that was way back in 86, before many people watching this were born. And so I did 7 by the time I went to Everest, it was my 7th Himalayan expedition, including 2 sorties to India.
I see. So I want to ask you, when you were planning to scale Mount Everest for the first time and you were going without oxygen, who was your inspiration at that time? And I have always read this quote of Edmund Hillary, who said that I didn't conquer the mountain, I conquered myself. And as a motivational speaker, that really appeals to me, because ultimately you conquer your own fears and your worries and your inhibitions. So who was your inspiration, and how was that first ever summit of the Everest?
Sir Edmund Hillary most definitely was a big inspiration for me. And I think as a New Zealander, he was inspiring because he showed that we could do it. And it wasn't some amazing athlete in Europe. And in fact, at his funeral, one of the people involved in that 1953 expedition came out and was speaking at his funeral and said how fantastic it was that 2 young men from small and interesting countries made the first ascent of Mount Everest. And I just thought that brought it back to the human side so superbly. And that's what we must remember, is that Sir Edmund Hillary wasn't Sir when he climbed it. He was a young man, and so he was climbing with another young man from Nepal, and they were just 2 young men climbing. And that's what you must remember about ourselves. We aren't necessarily doctors or poets or artists. We're just people out there trying to go and climb a mountain. And that actually should give you some strength as well, I think, because there's just so many possibilities that we have inside ourselves that need unlocking. And if we go in as a poet or go in as a climber, you'll get the shock that I got when I first went to Alaska. I thought I was a climber, but now I realize I've got a lot to learn.
So tell me about that first journey and that first, when you scaled Mount Everest without oxygen. Okay,
so when I climbed Mount Everest without oxygen, it took me a long time. I did all my acclimatizing, and in those days, the big difference in 1988, the big difference was the fact that we didn't have weather forecasting. No weather forecasting, no satellite phones, no internet, no fixed rope above 8,000 meters or 7,900 meters. No fixed rope. And so one of the problems with climbing Mount Everest is it's just kind of a big blob, and you need to be able to find your way in a whiteout on the way down, because there aren't necessarily footprints because it's icy when you climb it. And there are no ropes. And people never think about that these days. Of course, they don't have to. That's why we put the ropes up. So I was scared about, on the climb, I was most scared on summit day. And I was scared several times. And one was when I was at the south summit of Mount Everest. And that main summit is 100 vertical meters, but it's the most technical part of the climb. And I got to the south summit, which is 8,750 meters. And I knew I had enough energy to go down. And I figured I had enough energy to go to the main summit. But that bit in between, coming down from the main summit, down to the south summit, and then down, I didn't know if I could do. And really, I only just did it. So that was when I was really scared, all the way up to the summit from the main summit, from the south summit. Then I was scared finding my tent on the South Pole in the dark on the way down. And one other time I was scared, but it's just I was scared that I might not be able to find my way in the afternoon cloud, but there was no afternoon cloud, so I didn't have to worry.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is a remarkable feat, and being scared is obviously part of an athlete's life. And I mean, in that height and being whatever equipment you have, there must be times when you feel that, what the heck am I doing here? I mean, I'm sure that negativity sometimes creeps in because you're human. But how do you handle it, Lydia? How did you handle it?
I think you handle negativity and doubt, self-doubt, by having a few sleepless nights. And I think it's important when you look at people who are high achievers to realize that they still are having sleepless nights about the simple things. So if you and I went to go and climb a mountain, I might well have a sleepless night worrying about the weather that's coming in and whether we could dodge the weather and, just some logistics. It's what we do when we excel. We have fear and we have self-doubts, but you balance that with experience, and you balance it with doing everything small well. So for example, if you're writing, you have practice that you've done your grammar, your grammar, you recraft that one sentence 2 or 3 times. You have the art of the sentence, but you need to do the basic craft. You need to do the grammar, for example, and the way that words scan. And that is the same when you're in the mountains. You don't have that much to do, but you need to make sure that your boots stay dry inside, or you'll get frostbite the next day. You need to make sure that you have enough snow so that you can melt it, and you melt the water before you go to sleep so that you have enough to drink in the morning. You don't just go, I've got to go, I'm not going to drink, because that could kill you. So you break things down, whether it is writing, whether it is bike riding, whether it is mountain climbing, you break it down to very, very simple things. And you could be a 100-year-old craftsman, or you could be a very junior starter up person, and you still have to make those fine, simple things a craft. Yeah.
That's superb. That's very well said, Lydia. I totally agree with you. I play a game called cricket, which New Zealand knows pretty well. But it's. I mean, we're in a ground and we're playing against people, and we know we're going home in the evening, right? And soccer is the same, and badminton or tennis is the same. But when you're up there on a high peak and you have conquered some other very tough peaks as well, there is that element of uncertainty which cannot be really pushed away, and you're bound to have sleepless nights. There's no doubt about it. But what I want to ask you now is your preparation. And then when you come back, that reparation or that recovery. So what is it that you do when you are going to conquer a high peak? How many days do you mentally prepare yourself, and what is the physical preparation as well?
When you leave for a big mountain, you're often away for several months. So your preparation begins 3 months out, because you need to make sure that you have the right equipment ordered. As you know, only some of the big countries in the world could probably go into a shop, and buy everything. But probably in your country and my country, we can't. We need to make sure that things are ordered, that we have the right boots, that they fit. So you start your preparation again with those simple things, and then you pack everything and you send it away. And in between, you need to ensure that you are fit, and you need to ensure you also have some rest. So you train, and I train by some biking and some hill walking and working. And I train by working in New Zealand. And but you mustn't overtrain. So your preparation is equipment, your preparation is being fit, and your preparation is also thinking about strategy, finding out how many people are going to be on Mount Everest on that in 2019 on that side,
Right.
and what parties are they? Are they big parties of inexperienced people, or are they big parties that generally have high skilled people on them? And different nationalities tend to have different levels of expertise. So you're starting to gather information about your surroundings, and those three things intensify. Your fitness when you reach Everest, or it doesn't have to be Everest, but say Everest, Everest Base Camp, because I have climbed it another 5 times
Right.
as a guide. And so your fitness, you arrive fit, but you arrive unacclimatized. So now is the time that your fitness changes into an acclimatization. And your equipment has to be pared down and repaired probably, or something went missing, or you just have to make sure you have spare batteries ready, or you're constantly just grooming and doing your equipment preparation, and you're constantly strategizing right to the very last hour.
I can understand that. And then I also want to ask you about detail, like how much do you sleep and what do you carry as your food? What is in your haversack? What is it that what is the detail part of it?
Okay, so we could talk about 2 different things. So say you and I went on a big expedition to climb Mount Everest on a commercial trip. And I was your guide and you were my client. And
Yeah.
then in that case, you don't really have to carry much food at all, because you've paid to be on a commercial expedition. And if you pay more money, you will have more food, better food, and more Sherpa support and more oxygen.
Right.
That's
Yes.
really, really good. And if you have more oxygen, you are far less chance of having an injury, or getting frostbite, or even worse, getting cerebral edema and dying. So, so our preparation is walking to base camp, and I have to make sure right from when we leave Kathmandu, or when we leave, let's do a Nepal side, that you're not racing out and going too fast up those hills. We're only talking at 3,000 meters. We've got to get to almost 9,000 meters, but our preparation for the climb starts when we're walking in, not going too fast at 3,000 meters. And then
That's
constantly, so that on a commercial trip, and the same sort of thing happens on a smaller trip and a personal trip, but we probably have to carry the food, and we probably have to carry a sleeping bag, and so on. So your pack is bigger, it matters more, you have fewer luxuries, and you go slower. That's all it is.
That's it. And then the descent you spoke about, that maybe the snow has covered the footprints and stuff like that. Tell me about the descent. How tough is it to descend, and what is it that you keep in mind while coming back?
Well, if we are on Mount Everest together, then we will have fixed ropes now to descend. So we're not going to worry too much about losing our way. But what we are going to worry about is whether you have, or even I, have the energy to get down, because it looks easy, but it's just not it's a little bit technical in places. You need to think. You need to unclip and clip your carabiner onto the next rope. So if you don't do that properly, then, well, you could fall off the mountain. And so it's energy, and it's brain energy as well. And this is the same as whether you're playing cricket. You have to have the energy at the end of the game that you started the game with. I mean, ideally, you only have a little bit left because you've given it everything. But your brain has to be working, and your brain uses a lot of energy, and so you have to keep feeding it. Climbing Mount Everest lasts a little bit longer than a game, but
I agree.
Yes.
I totally agree. I want to ask you two questions together now. One is about the other difficult peaks, and which I know that climbing Mount Everest without oxygen must have been your most difficult climb, but any other peaks which were really challenging? And also about your partner, Dean, who's also an accomplished climber, and you have climbed together as well. So talk about these two things.
Okay, so some mountains are quite hard, but they only take, say, a day, and the hard part. And that would be Aoraki, Mount Cook, our highest peak in New Zealand. That's a really big physical and technical mountain. And of course, I've guided it, but there's a lot of different climbs, different routes on it. It's a massif. So some of the routes on that have been big days, or 2 or 3 days to climb Aoraki, Mount Cook. And that's been hard, and maybe I've gotten a little bit scared, and I've gotten really tired, and I've had a really wonderful time. And what was your other question? You asked me 2 questions.
Dean, about your partner. You forgot about Dean.
So Dean and I have done some good climbing together. We've climbed some other mountains. We've climbed in Pakistan together. We've climbed in Nepal together, but mostly on big peaks. We've climbed on Amar Dablam. We have not climbed together in India, but we have ski guided together in India, in Kashmir. And he was there this year as well. And you have such a beautiful country.
That's super. That's super.
And you just have such a beautiful country, and very beautiful people. And so, we worked together very well. As mountain guides, and we also love to be in the mountains together. And we don't mind if we are just doing some simple hiking, going up for a beautiful view, or something quite technical. We just love to share the mountains together. I would like to say that both of us, our joints are wearing out, because we are New Zealand mountaineers, so we've always had to carry big rucksacks, and both of us have quite sort of creaky, sore knees. So we have to be very careful about, not wasting our knees.
Yeah. You have to look after your knees, Lydia. I mean, these climbs are going to happen with more quality if we have good legs, good knees. Well, but it's amazing what you both have accomplished. And I want to ask you now about your career as a guide, a mountain guide, and also a physiotherapist. I believe you're a qualified physiotherapist. So tell me about these things, and how is it working together with Dean? I mean, is there professional rivalry at times as well within the family?
Oh, you are hilarious, because there's so many questions, and all together. Okay, so I grew up thinking that I was going to be an academic, and until I left school and then traveled for a few years, and then I decided I was really passionate about mountaineering. And way back in the 80s, I wanted to immigrate to the US, because there are 2 sides to the US, and one side is very open and welcoming, and they have amazing landscape. They have amazing hills and rocks and mountains and frozen waterfalls, and I was young. And so I decided that the people I talked to who were physiotherapists really liked being physiotherapists. I didn't know what a physio did exactly. And it was a wanted job in the US. So I decided after I climbed Everest, and I was on K2, and then I climbed Everest, that's what I would do. And just turn my phone off, down. And So after Everest, I studied physio, and then I never thought that I would be a mountain guide, because that's what people who were good at sports. And I
Yeah.
still had this thing that I wasn't good at sports. And then somebody persuaded me to do one climbing guides course, and I passed that. And then so I had to eventually finish my other climbing guides course, and I passed that. And in New Zealand, the international qualification of mountain and ski guide can be separated. So you could be a full climbing guide and you don't have to ski, or you could be a full ski guide and you don't
Me too. Okay.
have to climb. And
Yeah.
I never thought that I would be a ski guide, but I finished my climbing guiding, and then someone said, you should just try. And, you know, about 45 million sleepless nights later. No, seriously. You know, I am fully working outside of my comfort zone. And it's, I wake up still and I can't believe that I'm a mountain and ski guide. So I say publicly that for me, becoming a mountain and an international mountain and ski guide, which is the same qualification in France and Switzerland and stuff, it was a much bigger achievement for me than it is for some other people. But,
Yes.
you know, writing a poem might be a really big achievement for them and might be a little easier for me. So, you know, that's what life is. It's not
That's
the
what
same for every one of us. Each of us have our own struggles.
Yes, and the second part was professional rivalry with Dean. Any time when you feel that since you're in the same profession, do you ever get competitive at home? I mean,
Yeah, you know, that happens a little bit. And the funny thing is, if we work together on an expedition, I'm happy to let him run the expedition. And then, no, you know, it's just like, that is fine. He's got, you know, he can do his I'm the boss thing. And, but yeah, it gives you a little bit of freedom not being a leader, as you can imagine. Imagine the freedom not being a captain of a team. It does give you a little bit more freedom, and it gives you, yes, I think that's the case. So that doesn't matter to me so much, and I know it might even matter to him a little bit. But he's very, very supportive of me, and if we have any competition, it's only if you called us up and said, oh, Lydia, do you want to go and climb something in India and be my guide? And I'd go, oh, very excited. And then I'd rush off to India and have a fantastic time, and then he'd be jealous. And then same here, you know, he's got a job going to the Antarctic Peninsula. Oh, I'm so envious. But now I think as we've gotten older, we're, you know, that's the blessing. Yeah, we're much more relaxed. Yeah.
You can tell him that I think you're smarter than him from what I can hear about him from you.
No, he's one of those people. He puts his alpine sunglasses on and his climbing harness, and then bang, he's he's the mountain man. Yeah.
Right, good. But I also want to ask you any stories or anecdotes or any incidents that you remember. And did you ever get injured? Anything like that?
Okay, so I had my most formative experience of my life in India.
Okay.
And it's a long time ago, and I can't, I can tell the story and it can take half an hour. So I'm not going into great detail. But it was in the Gangotri, and it was in 1987. And I went with a group of people from Australia, just a little group of individuals, and one very, very strong climber. And we were going to traverse 3 peaks: Kedarnath Dome, Kedar Peak, and one other. And in those days, we didn't have maps. So the only maps were just like an A4 piece of paper with some lines drawn on it. And there were Indian military maps, but you couldn't get hold of those. No weather forecasting. So the long and the short of it, when you traverse a range, and this hadn't been done, this would have been a first ascent, then you can't necessarily just drop down the side of all the mountains that you're traversing. You can get up one end and down the other. That's what you're hoping to do. So we got caught out. It ended up the others went down on the first mountain, and we summited Kedarnath Dome. And then this big storm came in. Remember, we had no weather forecasting, and it was a huge storm. And one day we didn't have a tent on purpose. We were going light. And one day we spent sheltered in a crevasse, and I was quite sick with altitude, and it was snowing. And the next day we descended the face of a mountain from over 7,000 meters. We had never seen the face of the mountain, ever even looked at it because of the way that the valleys were shaped. We had no rope, and we had to do it in a snowstorm.
Oh, God.
And it was the most formative experience of my life. It was the sort of thing that you would never, ever, ever choose to happen to anybody, but we got away without just a tiny bit of frostbite on John's fingers, that's all.
Oh,
And
my God.
we had, yeah, it's an oh my God story, and I haven't got time to tell it, but let's say that we were down climbing steep parts, where avalanches would come down, but they wouldn't be big enough to push us off the mountain. We ended up trying to wade through armpit deep snow and got hit by other avalanches. And then we dug an emergency snow cave, and then an avalanche came down and buried me and collapsed the snow cave on me. And I buried myself in the mountain. And it was only by chance that John was outside and he could dig in the snow. And it was an absolute miracle that he could find me, because when you bury things in the snow, you never find them again. That's the rule of the snow. So we got 6 avalanches in one day, and the snow cave buried me. And then we still had to get off the mountain. And after 2 days of storm, the storm cleared, and we were able to descend the last part of the mountain. And several little miracles happened, really, to keep us alive, if you like. But the key thing that I take away, and this is like a motivational thing, if you like, at the end of the second day, so we'd had 6 avalanches, nearly died. I should have been buried alive, la-di-da. And we're sheltering under this piece of ice. And I'm looking for him, and I say, John, because he had climbed in the Gangotri before.
Okay.
And I said, how long do the storms last? And he goes, normally 2 days. And this was the second day. And he says, but sometimes I've seen them last 4 days. Oh. And I go, I could survive tonight. We didn't have a tent, like I said. And I was a bit wet from 5 days. This is day 6, And I could survive tonight, but I'll probably get some cold damage, like a little bit of frostbite. But I doubt if I'd be able to survive another 24 hours. And he said, yeah, I'm pretty much the same. And then what neither of us did was blame anything else or anyone, or we didn't rant and rave. We didn't complain that we were there, but we didn't lay any blame. We took responsibility for getting there in that situation, and we just waited out the weather and the snow started to ease off, and then the snow stopped, and then no moon, it was just starlight, and it cleared, and we could descend. But we only just had enough energy to descend, and the reason we had that energy was because we didn't lay the blame, because we took the responsibility, and because I didn't complain, because he didn't complain, we could give him 1/3 of energy, and he could give me 1/3, and we had 2/3 of energy between us, and we got down.
Wow, that's a great story, Lydia. Yeah, it's so inspiring and so tough it must be. But the way you told this story is like as if I am with you over there, and all our audience must be wondering how tough it was. But I mean, I'm sure it was really, really amazing, that learning experience. But tell me, does it help you in your speaking career? Because you're also a speaker now and you speak so well. Do you tell these stories, and are there times when you really thank your experiences, and now that you are able to speak about them, how does that feel?
It feels fantastic to be able to share experiences. And I like how you've called them experiences, because an experience isn't just that one I was telling you about in India. It continues on until today, doesn't it? And that's what you're sharing. It started when it started, but it never will finish until you die.
Right.
that's why experiences are so valuable. And now I am learning about it still differently to how I summarized it, say, 20 years ago. Does that make sense?
It does, because you are evolving as well. We're all evolving, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the bliss of an experience. I think it's a seed that continues to grow inside of you forever. No one will ever take an experience away, and we must treasure them. And they can be really simple. It's the experience of making a beautiful cup of tea, but using nice china. You know, the simple things can be also an experience. And so maybe all your life you've used you only have one cup, but it's a really nice cup. And, you know, you honor those experiences too, and they all build up and they create this amazing life. And it's amazing, but it's still just what other people do, drink cups of tea and hopefully not get buried in avalanches. There's a few out of the box experiences there.
Quite out of the box, out of many boxes and out of the world, actually. But I must tell you that this simplicity is something which is also a great asset, isn't it? I mean, someone who's successful yet remains grounded, and also perhaps a little spirituality, I see. So sometimes do you thank the Almighty up there for having saved your life 100 times?
I absolutely do, yes. And I don't say associate with a particular religion, but I think that there is a greater meaning to our world. And it's not just in humans. You know, there's a greater meaning to the world and the animals that we surround ourselves with, and the plants and nature. Yes, I give thanks pretty much every day.
That's super. That's super. I have a friend on the audience who's asking a question, so I'm going to ask you that question. He said, "Who else inspired you? Any other big icons or local people in New Zealand?" And he's asking specifically about Reinhold Messner, but anyone else?
Now, Reinhold Messner completely inspired me, and I read his book, of course. Thank you very much for reminding me about him. So the funny thing is that back in 2016, he came to Everest Base Camp and was staying there making some film, and he stayed at our base camp. And I was really excited to meet Reinhold Messner because he was one of my icons, and I read his books and I was inspired. And also I figured he'd be really excited to meet me because I also was the first woman to climb Everest without oxygen. And he wasn't very interested in meeting me at all. And which is slightly disappointing, but his staff were really nice. They go, "Oh, don't worry, he's, doesn't matter." And I just thought that was, I was upset for all your time, and now I just think it's funny. But it doesn't stop him being really inspirational. I wasn't there to inspire him. He inspired me. And I think those are the big icons, Ed Hillary and so on. But there've been people along the way. For example, way back in the first year, that in 1981, I met a Canadian waterfall climber, and he was a little bit older, and he was very quiet and very humble, and he was one of the hardest ice climbers in the world at the time, and he would climb a super, super hard frozen waterfall of the hardest grade that existed. At the same time, the story he would tell would be the fact that a little furry animal came and slept in his sleeping bag at the bottom of the waterfall before he climbed it. And he was humble, and he had these big serious dogs that he'd raced, on sled racing. And he had complete control of them, and he was very kind. And he was unbelievably kind and humble, and yet he was super hardcore badass climber. And he was a much more humble person and quiet and calm and if you like, less dominating than I was. So, that was an inspiration too, because it didn't just have to be the big names. Here he was really loving nature and really loving the cups of tea, the furry animals, at the same time as he was doing the hardest things in the world, solo without a rope. So
Very brave.
yes, and as you open the doors to experiences, you then realize that your neighbor over the fence has something to offer you. Not just the Ed Hillarys, not just the Reinhold Messners, but also that your neighbor. And it might be the way that he or she tends his garden, but you take that and you take it to the mountains, or you take it to your writing, or you take it to your discipline.
That's
And
very nice. Very
yeah,
nice.
you must. I think you can continue to seek inspiration and encouragement. Yeah.
That's lovely, Lydia. Very, very inspiring to say when you say that, how he tends to his garden and he does these little things. And that question came from Chitranjan Agarwal, by the way, who's a co-founder of Playwright along with me. And he's very excited to have you here as I am.
Thank you.
But one couple of other more things to go before we leave. I would also request you to name those people you remember who you'd like to thank for your entire career. Any one or two names, maybe family, maybe friends. Just thank anyone who made you what you are.
Well, I would definitely like to thank a very old friend of mine. He's actually my oldest friend, and his name is John Visser, and he's 86. And he's Dutch, but he came to New Zealand when he was in his 20s. He's very funny and very sporty, even in 86. And so I have and I have a woman called Margaret Clark, and she took me under her wing, and she was a very experienced mountaineer. So when I was 14, 15, and 16, she and I did quite a few climbs together, and she essentially guided me and encouraged me. And then I have younger people now who inspire me. And like a friend of mine who I have guided, but so many of my clients become friends. Her name is Ket Hazeldine, K-E-T, short for Jaquetta. And she inspires me because she is the same, a little bit older than me, but she keeps herself fit and she keeps herself strong, and she dresses fashionably, and she ski tours and mountain climbs, and she does all those things. But as you get older, you know, she she cares for her body and herself. And I find that very inspiring as well. And then, and Dean Staples, my partner, he inspires me as well.
I'm
He
sure he
inspires, if it
does.
wasn't for him, I wouldn't be a mountain guide, because he provided the encouragement and support. Yeah.
Wonderful to know. And of course, your mom who sent you out to that camp and that course when you were such a tiny little girl. And
My mother inspired me. Yes, I was sad that I didn't grow up with my father, but my mother had to step in, and as a mother and father, she did a great job. Yeah. Thank you.
that's super. And also, I would like you to maybe address young aspiring climbers now and tell them what they should be mentally prepared for in their career. What are the qualities they should try to develop in themselves?
Well, a good message for aspiring climbers, whether they be young or old, is to enjoy to develop the simple things that are really boring to do, right? Like melting snow for water. That's really boring, but make it a craft. And don't expect to get out scot-free. You're going to be, say, much more uncomfortable than you thought, but then for some reason that will be your most exciting and memorable day. You will have to step out of the comfort zone, but if you've done your preparation and your equipment is in good condition, even if you only have one piece of equipment, then you'll be fine. You know, so it's also not getting into trouble, not making mistakes. We must remember that as humans, we evolve by making mistakes. There is even a museum of failures out there in the world. I mean, it's travels. It's an amazing thing. You can Google it. The Museum of Failure. Without failures, we cannot be successful. We cannot learn what works and what doesn't work. So it's not the fact that you won't make mistakes. It's what you do when you've made the mistake. You take self-responsibility for the amount that you can, and you get yourself out of it. And, you know, it might not be perfect. You'll be a lot better next time.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
So true. That's so true. Well said. Very well said. And in fact, you use the term scot-free, and we have a question about Scott Fisher. Our last
Oh,
question of the day. He
yeah.
said, Sandeep Sandhu, who's a golfer now, is asking, how would you compare the climbing of Scott Fisher without oxygen to that of the early pioneers who climbed the Everest?
I just missed. How would I compare the climbing of Scott
Scott
Fisher with?
Fisher without oxygen and compare it to some of the others who climbed before him without oxygen. He just wants to. Maybe you can talk about Scott Fisher.
Well, I don't know. I don't know as much as the person questioning about Scott Fisher, but you know, his previous experience before the big 1996 disaster, but if you like. But I do know that he was an exceptionally good climber, and he became a guide, not an international qualified guide, but you didn't have to be for the Himalayas, and I think that's great. And he was, you know, the famous movie Everest really didn't give him the tribute that he deserved, because he was a spearhead. He spearheaded international high altitude guiding. So he technically and at altitude he was an exceptional athlete, and he could have gone on and just been an athlete, but he decided to step left, and that's largely what I've done as well, and become a guide. And then he became an exceptional guide. And what happened. And some people didn't get out of it, obviously. But they were early days and without weather forecasting. So yeah, I can't say I have heard one bad thing ever in my life about Scott Fisher.
Wonderful, wonderful, inspiring people. And what you said about young people and not so young people, how they should take their careers. Absolutely priceless advice, Lydia. And also the Museum of Failure, which you mentioned, I shall check it out. Chitranjan, my friend, is mentioning it also as wow. He says we should check it out. But what you say about learnings from life and how life teaches you, it is also our own receptivity, and we also evolve, as you and I agree, to think. And I think it's been wonderful talking to you, Lydia. So, what are your closing remarks? And thank you once again for joining us.
I think my closing remarks are that I do feel quite lucky to live in New Zealand, although it's not very easy to leave New Zealand at the moment. We're like a little island. And I'm very, very grateful to have met you. I'm very grateful for you all to be listening to my interview. Thank you. I feel honoured, a little bit humbled. And I look forward to being in touch again. That would be great pleasure.
Maybe we can have you in Playwright Chandigarh one day when we have a conference with a hall full of people and we don't have to worry about masks and things. So look forward to seeing you at that time.
I would love to be there. It would be such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Lydia. We sign off now once again. Thank you very much.